Following the Battle of Endor, the Dark Empire had been secretly built as a contingency for Palpatine during his reign over the galaxy as Emperor, and it was located within the deep core and led by the reborn Emperor Palpatine after he had transferred his essence into a cloned body of himself. This new regime tried to reclaim the territory of the former Galactic Empire after it had succumbed to the Imperial Civil War and splintered into various warlord-opposing factions. Although this power was formed when Palpatine revived himself in a clone body in 4 ABY, it would officially reveal itself in 10 ABY when Papa Palps became strong enough to attack the New Republic. However, his new empire fell apart less than a year later in 11 ABY upon Palpatine's final death on Onderon, as well as the destruction of Biss, which was the capital stronghold of the Dark Empire. Palpatine had needed to recover his strength before resuming his conquests and revealing his revival. Therefore, he observed the crumbling state of his old empire from behind the scenes. Likewise, the New Republic, although they were fully aware of Biss's existence, had no idea that it had any connection to Palpatine and thought it was just a civilian population, and of course, in their infinite wisdom, decided not to even investigate. You see, Palpatine's primary supply of clones was kept on Biss and was guarded by loyal Dark Jedi and immense genetically altered guards, which was maintained by a trusted private physician. Unfortunately, the clones were heavily ravaged by the dark side and not sustained by the Force. Each body he took would age and deteriorate more quickly than the last. However, Palpatine wasn't very concerned, as he had an endless supply of clones which he could use to rule the Empire with. Palpatine and Grand Vizier Sate Pestage were also indirectly responsible for the Trioculus affair in 5 ABY, as they had leaked information about the glove of Darth Vader to the false Kadan, in order to further fracture the Imperial warlord factions, as what Palpatine saw as a weeding out of the weak. Years passed as Palpatine slowly regained his power and became more and more powerful, as well as absorbed in the dark side. He did not ignore the quarrels of his fractured empire, and he actively sought to keep it fragmented until he was prepared for his return. His Emperor's Hands and Noghri assassins made short work of anyone who came pretty close to seizing even what would be remotely seen as the throne for themselves to unify the Empire. While he was recovering in the deep core, Palpatine's former advisors received word in 8 ABY of the arrival of Grand Admiral Thrawn from the unknown regions. Thrawn was, of course, a tactical mastermind who was armed with a plan to defeat the New Republic. If Thrawn proved too independent, Palpatine felt that he could always be eliminated. And for half a year, and with a fleet that was a very small portion of what the Empire had once maintained, Thrawn would regain much lost territory. However, despite Thrawn's impressive victories, even the Grand Admiral could not be seen as gaining too much power before Palpatine revealed himself. It was heartening to Palpatine to see how Thrawn dealt with the fractured Empire as he returned, and Palpatine would even issue orders and counter-orders which would impede various warlord factions as well as Thrawn. These orders were the reason that many of the warships that Thrawn needed for his campaign had vanished into fortress systems, which forced Thrawn to rely on the Katana fleet. Thrawn's cunning tactics and unerring strategies brought him the Empire to the brink of victory in 10 ABY, and he might have even been successful if it wasn't for the betrayal of his Noghri bodyguard Rook. You see, when Thrawn made his own claim about being Emperor of the Galaxy, Palpatine watched in genuine sadness, as no contender to the Imperial throne could be allowed to have too much power compared to him. Yet, Thrawn was a useful tool in Palpatine's grand plan as he diverted attention away from his resurrection. When Thrawn was slain, Palpatine knew it was time to announce his return very soon. It wouldn't be until 10 ABY, about a year later, where Palpatine had fully recovered enough strength to reveal himself, and his empire launched Operation Shadow Hand with his rebuilt forces, and with the aid of various Imperial warlords who Palpatine had deemed worthy to serve him once again. However, the Dark Empire would have a pretty short reign, as both Eclipse-class dreadnoughts would be destroyed by the New Republic, as would the Galaxy Gun. Although the Empire's onslaught saw world devastators destroy planets and Imperial forces would retake much of the former Empire, it would still fall. However, the question of today's video, after all that context, is what if Palpatine had revealed the Dark Empire directly after the Battle of Endor? The state of the galaxy at this time is rather chaotic to say the least. The rebels had just destroyed the second Death Star, and the Empire has started to see some warlords peel off with their own forces. Despite this major victory for the Rebel Alliance, they were still not the galactic hegemon, and what remained of the Empire under Sate Pestage which hadn't split off yet, would be controlling much of the known galaxy for now. If Palpatine had revealed his survival in a cloned body and the Dark Empire immediately after the Battle of Endor, you might wonder if the Empire would still be fractured. And to that I would say kind of. Not to the same degree as it was in the actual expanded universe, but those warlords who peeled off as soon as they could would be definitely going their own way, like Joseph Grunger and Fatty Zinj. However, other warlord kingdoms such as Zero Command, the Redo Authority, the Alignment, and others would remain part of the known Empire. With the immediate launch of Operation Shadow Hand, the Dark Empire's forces are still going to attack New Republic planets like Mon Cala with World Devastators, as well as Imperial forces from the BIS Defense Fleet. The Dark Empire's superweapons like the Galaxy Gun and Eclipse-class dreadnoughts will also be unleashed. The New Republic will be caught pretty off guard by this unified Imperial attack, as the Empire really hasn't descended too much into a civil war yet. However, things aren't going to be perfect for the Empire, as Palpatine is pretty weak. When the New Republic begins a counterattack, things will be very different because Luke Skywalker hadn't fallen to the dark side to infiltrate Palpatine and the Dark Empire. Additionally, the Dark Empire's forces include a lot more capital ships from the former Galactic Empire, which hasn't seen 6 years of civil war and withering away. So things for the New Republic will be somewhat more difficult. But like I said before, Palpatine is pretty weak and hasn't recovered or regained his strength. This will make it a lot easier for someone like Karnor Jax to betray Palpatine and easily kill his clones on BIS. Now I definitely think someone will quickly betray Palpatine, as during the actual Operation Shadow Hand, Palpatine didn't even make it within a full year when he was fully regenerated before being betrayed. So I think it's pretty safe to say that Karnor Jax, some of Palpatine's Dark Jedi, or just someone else is going to quickly backstab the reborn Emperor to try to take over the Dark Empire after the initial Operation Shadow Hand onslaught. The course of the rest of the Galactic Civil War will depend on how the post-Palpatine Dark Empire operates from 5 ABY onwards, and it will definitely be fractured. But the New Republic would have been seriously crushed back into being a rebellion, as an Imperial Civil War would start to engulf the galaxy. A power vacuum ensues where warlords control their own territories, as something like the Crimson Empire controls a good chunk of the former Dark Empire. At the same time, the Rebel Alliance for now is considered a pretty insignificant force as warlords battle over the galaxy. This will probably be the state of things until 9 ABY when Grand Admiral Thrawn returns. This is of course just my opinion. What do you think would have happened had the Dark Empire been revealed right after the Battle of Endor? Write in the comments, and thank you for watching.